Good morning, everyone. Let's do some prayers and then continue with our topic, which we started last week. Om Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Parbrahma, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Om Bhur Bhavaswaha, Tatsavitra Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi, Diyo Yo Nah Prachodayat, Asto Ma Satgamya, Tamso Ma Jyotirgamya, मृत्योर्मामृतं गम्य ओम सहनावतु सहना भुनक्तु सवीर्यं करवावहि तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहि ओम शांति 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 ओम. So last week we started looking into a very important part of our existence over here. Time to leave this world, which normally we call it death. And often we don't want to talk about it. But as students, we should be prepared for it, because this is something which will definitely happen. Anything else may or may not happen. But we study the scriptures, and all the rishis, they have been telling us that this is inevitable. So today let's look at what happens at the time of death. We stop breathing and the game is over. But before breathing ceases, certain signs and symptoms of impending death manifest in the breath. When a person dies suddenly as the result of an accident or an abrupt failure of the vital organs, we do not get a chance to observe subtle changes in the breathing pattern. But when death is the result of a lingering illness or old age, the breath gradually becomes shallow, and the pause between inhalation and exhalation lengthens. Then, as lack of oxygen causes the thinking process to deteriorate consciousness, and linear thinking gradually vanishes, and awareness begins to shift between the consciousness and the unconscious state. The conscious mind, which always works in coordination with the brain, nervous system, and senses, begins to lose its grip, and the unconscious mind takes over. This is a jumbled state. The dying person is neither fully conscious nor completely unconscious. In this confused state, we are no longer capable of employing the senses and brain to gather data from the external world and process it in a systematic and structured manner. Nor can we consciously and systematically retrieve data from the unconscious mind, because clarity is gone. And the confusion dominates both the conscious and the unconscious mind. We all know clarity is knowledge, and confusion is Maya, the veil of ignorance. And as the veil of ignorance thickens in the dying process, mastery over the self disappears, and our sense of self-identity becomes muddled. In this disjointed state, the unconscious mind takes over and creates an entirely new world of impressions. And if at this juncture we can somehow maintain conscious control over ourselves and exercise the powers of will and determination, we can fill our entire inner realm with the train of thought of our choice. When we realize that death is upon us, that the body, breath, and conscious mind are about to fall apart, we can use this chosen train of thought as a vehicle in which to migrate voluntarily from the conscious to the unconscious mind, and allowing ourselves to enter the unconscious not as a slave, but as a master. If the train of thought we use as a vehicle is imbued with divine awareness, it can illuminate the realm of the unconscious. And then we will not fall victim to an apparently random stream of unconscious contents. But if we cannot maintain conscious control, we will be totally dependent on the nature of the unconscious contents of our mind. And that could be either heavenly or hellish or a mixture of both. That is why the scriptures say your train of thought at the time of death determines where you will go. Mind is the carrier. Now the question is, how can we maintain conscious control over the unconscious during the time of death? The yogis say that we are the makers of our own destiny. They tell us that if we unfold our potential and make the best use of the possibilities life offers, we are certain to live joyfully and leave this body gracefully. This body is like a rented apartment. And who's the landlord? The Prakriti, the nature. We dwell in our apartment until our lease is over. During our tenancy, we must follow the laws set by the nature. If we violate them, it causes debility and disease, and this results in early eviction. On the other hand, compliance with the nature's laws, including non-violence, truthfulness, compassion, non-attachment, and non-possessiveness, engenders an environment in which we can live joyfully. This is what our rishis said in that small saying which we repeat again and again in our mantras, idam namam. Nothing is ours. But we must always maintain the awareness that nothing in the world, including this physical body, is ours. While we live in this body, we must discover the purpose of life. We just get so attached to the body, we just forget the purpose. It's almost like a young student going to a college forgets about why he's there. To study, to pass, to get the degree. Instead, just parties, getting involved in the clubs, wasting the time. That's exactly most of us do. And when the lease for this rented apartment has expired, we must graciously hand the keys of a breath over to the landlord, or we will be evicted. Attachments to the objects of the world creates a deep sense of fear and insecurity at the time of death. Because throughout our life, we have continuously filled our minds with the idea that the objects of the world and the people we love are integral to our existence, that life without them will be empty, nothing. But there comes a time when we must continue our journey without our family, without our friends, and without our possessions. At that moment, we find ourselves at a loss. And even though we know that parting is inevitable, we still attempt to hold on. We fail and we are overwhelmed by insecurity, frustration, fear, and grief. And all of that clouds the mind field. And because of that clouding, our train of thought on which we are relying upon, it just sweeps us away into the next realm. What is the alternative? Alternative is to approach the next realm in full awareness that this entire world has come from the divine, exists in the divine, and ultimately returns to the divine. How can we cultivate that? We can do this by cultivating the understanding. In this world, I own nothing. All the objects of the world are gifts from the divine, which I must use to accomplish the higher purpose of life. And when the time comes, I must leave them behind without clinging to them. If we are established in this awareness, it will grant us a great sense of freedom at the time of death. Then we can leave this body gracefully, and our unconscious mind will be fully illumined. So it is possible to maintain conscious control over ourselves at the time of death. Because if it is not possible, they will not talk about it in the scriptures. But only if we have practiced maintaining awareness of the divine throughout our life. It's not only at the end we can just remember this. We got to do the sadhana, the practice throughout our life. At the moment of death, there is usually so much pulling and pushing going on in different levels of our being that there is no time to think about philosophy. Just putting the Gita mantras on YouTube by any relative will not help. That is not the time to learn the philosophy. Only if the conviction that nothing in this world is ours is a part of our normal awareness, will it be possible for us to effortlessly and peacefully drop all our desires and attachments? Hand over the keys of breath to nature and walk out of this body before Maya throws the blanket of confusion over us. The scriptures constantly remind us that we can gain firm ground in awareness through prolonged, uninterrupted, meditative practices. And that such practice must be accompanied with love and faith. Satikara sevita, dhirakal, nirantra. Those are the terms used by the rishis to stay on this path. Now the question is there a way of knowing whether we'll be successful in creating the train of thought of our choice while we are dying? How clear and deep the grooves of a specific train of thought determines how effortlessly we can hold on to that thought during the time of departure. And the depth and the clarity of the grooves depend on how profoundly that thought has pervaded every aspect of our life. So this is what we need to introspect, because these thoughts are our thoughts. They reside in the recesses of our Cheta, deeper mind. For example, if the grooves related to mantra awareness are deeper than all other thoughts, and if love and faith in the mantra has pervaded our awareness more profoundly than anything else, then we can predict with certainty that the mantra awareness will be maintained during the time of death. That's why a yogi guru says, recite this mantra, not just with the mouth, not just with the hand on the rosary, that how many mantras I have done, but with each breath going in and out. In a common Hindi language, they say, कर की माला छोड़कर मन की माला जप. Kar means hand. Sure, in the beginning we need that little rosary. But ultimately, when we are leaving this body, we will not even know where that rosary is, or will our hands be strong enough to hold the rosary? So, man ki mala japa. Or another thing they say, shwas shwas mein jap. That means in every breath, every inhalation, every exhalation. That's why the yogis, they came up with techniques like a Kevali pranayam we were talking about yesterday. In that pranayam, what is the mantra? Soham. I am that. We are supposed to just absorb that thought construct inside our mind with the help of that pranayam. I am that. Soham. If we have done practice like this with love and faith in the mantra, then we can predict with certainty that mantra awareness will be maintained during the time of death. The Bible says, you cannot serve two masters. To ensure that your mantra will come forward to illumine your path during the time of death, you must channel all your thoughts and emotions towards that mantra, towards that master. Not only during meditation, but also during your daily activities. Because sitting down meditation, or even the prayers, we do it a short period of time. Out of 24 hours, what is the percentage of that? But the rest of the time, use this technique. You may not need to remember the words of the mantra, but its feeling should be maintained day and night if you want to reach to that pinnacle. To test whether or not every moment of your life is filled with mantra awareness, watch your mind. When it is not actively engaged in a task you have set for it, and see if it wanders or broods instead of resting in that mantra. Check yourself. These days, we are in a habit of checking our emails and the phones. Every time we pick up a phone or log in, check your mind first. Create this habit. See what the mind is doing. Does it remember that mantra? Does it remember the divinity? Or is it all the time just absorbed into this Maya? If mantra awareness has become your strongest habit, then it will come forward automatically during the time of transition. Such a habit is an eternal friend, one that wards off all unconscious habits and the confusions created by them. A graceful departure is the fruit of long preparation. And in yogic terms, this preparation consists of consciously training the unconscious mind. The technique of meditation helps us to do this. So we develop the ability to let go of that which is unwanted and retain the memory of that which is illuminating, which is divine. When we can do this, we can maintain conscious control over our unconscious mind during the time of death. And the time to practice all this is now. And if we have reached to this level, then death is neither frightening nor confusing. Another topic about death in our scriptures, which is mentioned, is the prevention of death. There's a lot written about that also. the subject of preventing death, or at least staving it off, because it has fascinated throughout the ages to people. So yoga abhyasis are no exceptions. In fact, if you look at the early literature, which focuses mainly on the yogi's quest for immortality, and that's how yogis developed two main ways to approach this goal. One involves making the body indestructible, and the other is to identify with that aspect of ourselves that remains unaffected by the changes brought about by death. According to the first approach, body is made up of 5 gross elements, which are constantly undergoing change: earth, water, fire, air, space, Panchabhut. If the simple rules of nature are followed, anyone who's born must die, dust must return to dust. However, by practicing some of the higher techniques of yoga, these simple rules can be transcended, and a yogi can achieve complete freedom from old age, disease, and death. There's a term for this in our scriptures. It's known as Kaya Siddhi. Kaya means the body. Siddhi, the accomplishment. The tradition of Guru Gorakhnath emphasizes the approach to immortality. It follows how to maintain what we have to achieve the purpose of life. So as long as we have a body, because it is the greatest loss when we die, especially if we did not know ourselves at every level. So that's why in that tradition, they follow this path, Kaya Siddhi. They also maintain that the human body is fully equipped with all the tools and means necessary for self-realization. According to this tradition, it is of the utmost importance to remain embodied so that we may realize the self in this one lifetime, instead of dying and starting all over again in the next life. So this is the philosophy they adhere to. So these yogis, they have developed techniques for rejuvenation, longevity, as well as for disintegrating and reintegrating the molecules of their body at will. So they have learned these techniques and they practice it. These techniques are known as Rasayan Kriya, Kaya Kalp, and even Par Kaya Pravesh. So these are not just the terms. These are the siddhis which can be attained through lot of practice. So Rasayan Kriya, Kaya Kalp, Par Kaya Pravesh, and then fourth one is Asmita Siddhi. Through Asmita Siddhi, a yogi creates his own mind, and from that self-created mind, Nirman Chit creates a body, which is called Nirman Kaya. Mention of this is in Yoga Sutras also, in the 4th chapter. Nirman Chit. One who has mastered this technique is able to remain on this plane of existence at will. And by passing the process of death and birth. So these are very higher level of practices. But the second approach to immortality the yogis developed is to disidentify from the body altogether. That means I am not this body altogether. And identify instead with that aspect of ourselves which existed before conception, which will continue to exist after death. This requires learning techniques for penetrating the different layers of our being. The physical body, Sathul Sharir, the pranic body, the mind, the intellect, and the ego. So Sathul Sharir, Suksham Sharir, and Karan Sharir. And finally reaching the transcendental realm of consciousness where the soul dwells in perfect glory and bliss. And this approach is upheld by the yogis of the Upanishadic order. According to them, it is not worthwhile to devote so much energy to changing all that which is changing. That means the physical part of us. Their approach is to use this body. They believe that this is a temple we reside in. We need to take care of this body, but we don't need to preserve this body to achieve that highest goal. They understand that there's a wealth which is contained in this physical body. Uncover that. And that wealth is the immortal within. That divinity, that light, that Atma, self, whatever we want to call it. This approach gave rise to the techniques of Raj Yoga, Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and Jnana Yoga, as well as to different methods of prayers, contemplations, meditations, so that we can pierce through these layers and get to that immortal who we are, eternal who we are. Because in the Upanishads, in the Bhagavad Gita also, it's very clearly stated that we are the Ansh of that Anshe. And the purpose of this human life is to know ourselves, who we are. So it's up to us which path we want to take. That freedom we have as a human being. But the goal is the same. Goal is to know ourselves. Which path we want to walk on, it's up to us. So all this information is just to make us aware that life is to know ourselves. That is the goal. The practice we must do We can find this knowledge in the scriptures. We can hear it from the teachers. But ultimately, walking we must do. Whichever way we want to walk, because goal is the same for all of us. So next week, I will touch upon other aspects of this subject, and that will be the last lecture on this series about death. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaye Purnameva Vishishyate Om Shanti 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 Om. Thank you very much.